Yeah, let's see if we can pull in Assistant Secretary Russell. You want to do an introduction, John? Or?
Oh, we've got
There
him.
he
Great.
is.
Wow, technology is working. Danny, hello. It is my great honor.
John.
It's my great honor to introduce to you the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, Danny Russel. And I know many of you in this room already know Danny, both from his writings and from his many trips here to Australia. He was here earlier in the year. And you'll also know, if you do know Danny, that he is the consummate diplomat. As proof of that, I will note that when I worked on the Hill for about 10 years, so I've maintained pretty close relationships on the Hill, and when I talk to them about Danny, it is clear he is beloved on both sides of the aisle in Washington, and it does not get any tougher than that. So we are very fortunate to have him as our chief Asia hand at the State Department, as well as having served at the National Security Council in the White House before that. More importantly, he is the chief architect, really, of the Obama administration's strategic rebalance to the Asia-Pacific region. So we are all very excited and pleased that he could join us today, thanks to his electric personality. Please join in welcoming him, Danny Russel.
Well, thank you very much, John. I hope you all can hear me well. I heard you only too well, and I'm blushing. You're too kind, and at best, I'm only a battery-operated amateur architect. So thank you for the introduction. I want to return the favor by saying how proud the President is, the Secretary is. Certainly I am, and I think I speak for the nation in really commending you, Ambassador Berry, for your terrific work. You're off to a great start. We very much appreciate the work that you're doing and the role that you're playing in building up the great relationship that the U.S. and Australia enjoy, and you did a wonderful job in assisting in preparations and in participating in the recent visit to Washington by Prime Minister Abbott. I want to say thank you and welcome to my many friends in the audience, including Bates Gill and the members of Parliament, the former members of Parliament, and a lot of distinguished colleagues. I am regretful that I can't be there in person. I've been part of the conference in the past, and I had hoped very much to be able to come. I also worked with former Secretary Clinton on the launch of the Perth USA Center in 2012 with you all at the U.S. Studies Center, along with other partners. So working with you has been important. This is a great group with a great program. There's a lot of wisdom in the room. And particularly since the remarks by Ambassador Berry were comprehensive and perceptive, I will do my best to be short-winded, not long-winded, and leave space for some discussion and some questions. As you heard just now from Ambassador Berry, Prime Minister Abbott had a really productive, very solid visit to Washington last week that brought home how much we have in common, brought home the real warmth between our two people. You got a bit of a readout just now from the ambassador, but clearly the announcement by the two leaders of the U.S.-Australian Force Posture Agreement was very consequential. It will further enhance bilateral cooperations between our two militaries and provide needed additional reach throughout the region. There was a very substantive and productive discussion about our strong commercial ties, and that includes, of course, one of the primary agenda items, which is moving the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations forward. And as the President made very clear, Australia has been a tremendously constructive partner. There was an in-depth discussion of our common interest in and our joint work to strengthen regional institutions and organizations, including and particularly those built around ASEAN, to help develop and help sustain and maintain regional rules of the road, including, importantly, in the South China Sea, where there is a considerable amount of tension and friction. And it is a global relationship, and the two leaders had a conversation about the global situation, including important security issues from Ukraine to the Middle East to North Korea. One of my takeaways from this discussion is how vividly it highlighted both the commitment of the U.S. to the Asia-Pacific region and Australia's critical role as an ally, as a partner, and as an influential regional actor. Now, the ambassador jokingly referred to me as the architect of the rebalance. I think at best I can claim to have been present at the creation. The only real architect of the rebalance was Barack Obama, and he brought with him in January of 2009 the conviction that America's economic future and America's security interests in the 21st century rest on our ability and determination to actively participate and contribute and benefit from the growth of the East Asian Pacific region. And I am clear about the importance of the Pacific in that equation. Now, there is a conceit in the U.S. and, frankly, in much of the international community that the rebalance started in 2011. And although I happen to know that it began much earlier, the mystery as to why people think its birth was attributable to 2011 is pretty simple. I was with the president when he gave a landmark speech at Parliament House, and without a doubt, the visit in 2011 to Canberra and then to Darwin was a very important milestone, not just in our bilateral relationship, but in America's engagement in the region. There are more important milestones coming, big ones and small ones. Over the last 48 hours here in the State Department, Secretary Kerry has hosted a very creative and a very important oceans conference that brought together partners from throughout the Asia-Pacific region, including many of the Pacific Island leaders, some distinguished representatives from Australia, including the Deputy Environment Minister and others. And we got a lot of work done, and we set an ambitious agenda in terms of development, sustainable development, in terms of preservation of the maritime resource environment, as Ambassador Berry alluded to. And there will be follow-through in some of the international meetings, as well as future oceans conference in the balance of this year and next year. We will host a visit in a few days by your neighbor, Prime Minister Key, who's visiting Washington, and by a slightly more remote neighbor, Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Hsien Loong. And that's just illustrative of a very brisk tempo of visits by President Obama to the region. There'll be another visit in 2014. And visits to Washington by a whole host of Asian leaders, and not only from Northeast Asia by any means. There are further TPP negotiating sessions ahead, and I'm sure ministerial. Secretary Kerry and our Treasury Secretary Jack Lew will be in just a few weeks leading the U.S. delegation to Beijing for our annual strategic and economic dialogue. We will be fielding a delegation to the Pacific Islands Forum in Palau. Of course, Secretary Kerry will attend and participate in the ASEAN Regional Forum and the EAS Ministerial in Burma in August. The OSMIN is a very important meeting that he and Secretary Hagel will attend shortly thereafter. We've got the SIDS conference coming up at the very end of August. Of course, as the ambassador alluded to, not only will President Obama attend APEC in Beijing and the East Asia Summit in Naypyidaw, he will participate in the G20 leaders meeting in Brisbane. So there is as I said, a very brisk tempo of visible engagement. There is constant and ongoing diplomatic, economic, commercial, security-related engagement with the region as a whole and with Australia in particular. And that's critical for the region's peace and stability as well as its economic growth. It's particularly important, we believe, both for the alliance to be strong and to modernize, but also for the U.S. to be recognized as present and accounted for at a period when tensions in the South China Sea and in the East China Sea are rising. It's essential also, as I said, and as Ambassador Berry pointed out, not only in the defense and the security realm, where we're doing great work together, but in trans-border issues like global health, like space, science and technology, environment, development, and of course, importantly, in economic relations and trade, for us to be working closely together. We're proud to be the largest foreign investor in Australia. We're proud to work together in multilateral institutions, whether it's APEC or the G20, to support sustainable growth and shared prosperity. And we're determined to carry forward the work that we're doing with Australia and other countries to conclude TPP negotiations and grasp the job-producing, high standards, inclusive arrangement that we're all after. The last thing on my list to mention is the strength of our cultural and people-to-people ties. The number of Australians that studied in the U.S. just last year is significantly up. I think we're at something like 4,200 students, which is a big bump over what we'd seen in the past. And this is not merely a head counting exercise regarding the number of students in the United States at any given moment, or vice versa. The alumni, over time, many of whom are in the room with you, do a lot to advance our collaboration, to strengthen our ties, and to, frankly, expand the horizons of human knowledge. So it looks like a great conference. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person. The U.S. is ably represented by Ambassador Berry, and I see some other familiar and very respected names on the speaker's program. Let me stop here and see if folks have any questions that I can address.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Danny. Let me give a round of applause. Danny, thanks very much, Danny. This is Bates Gill here. Just let me extend our warm welcome to you, and thank you very much for taking the time. It's getting late in the evening there in Washington, D.C. I know you've got a lot of other work to be doing yet, and we appreciate the time you've offered us. There's 250 people here in the room, Danny, but there's no way we're going to be able to get to everyone, and we're already running a little bit behind in our schedule, so I thought we'd just take maybe one or two questions. I was very, very pleased that you noted the uptick in student numbers in the United States from Australia. We at the U.S. Studies Center hope we're doing our part. We're now getting up to around 200 students a year that we're sending from Australia to our study abroad programs in LA and in Washington, D.C., and we are hoping soon to expand that to include opportunities in New York as well. But let me open it up to the floor. Maybe I'll just take one or two questions right away, Danny, if that's all right, and you can respond to given the shortness of time that we have. Would anyone from the floor care to raise an issue or question for Danny at this point? Danny, let me pose a question to you. I think in spite of what is obvious, as you said, a visible presence of the United States engaged in this region, I think for whatever reason, there remains still some skepticism, some concerns. Some of it, I think, arises out of what we hear in Washington in relation to budgets, as well as to a sort of political dysfunction, that some people wonder whether or not there is indeed, over the long term, the financial as well as political will to deliver on the promise which stands before us in terms of the rebalance and engagement in this region. I know that you grapple with this. You've just recently been before Congress trying to justify the next fiscal year's budgetary resources for this. I wonder if you could just give us a little bit of a flavor of how you grapple with these fiscal and political issues inside the Beltway in Washington and see that they turn in a way that can really be supportive of the aims you have.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Bates. Certainly, politics in Washington looks pretty awful, particularly from a distance. And I can say, as an amateur student of history, that it is awful. It's been awful, and it's basically always been awful. If for laughs you want to turn the clock back to the late 1790s and look at the battles after George Washington stepped down, you'll get a flavor for just how acrimonious and ugly partisan bickering can be. That's not an excuse, but it's perhaps a little bit of perspective. The fact is that one of the significant areas of real bipartisan agreement is on the importance to the United States of the Asia-Pacific region. Now, in an era of austerity and given a widespread political conviction that government should be on the small side, we have to justify our asks, we have to fight for resources, and we have to make a strong case. The good news is that we're doing that, and I think we're doing that successfully. At least in the State Department, the budget for foreign assistance for East Asia and the Pacific has actually gone up, and gone up in an era where, as they say, down is the new flat. One of the reasons that it's gone up is that the administration has made it a strategic priority. Another reason that it has gone up is that there's widespread agreement in the Congress that this is important. More broadly than the FY15 budget resources, either for the State Department, for U.S. Agency for International Development, or for that matter, for the Defense Department and Commerce Department and others, I would make two key points. The first point is that, as a former boss of mine, Tom Donnellan, frequently said, the most precious resource in the U.S. government is time. And the allocation of time and attention by President Obama, by Vice President Biden, by Secretary Kerry and Secretary Clinton before him, by Secretary Hagel and others, including the new Commerce Secretary, Penny Pritzker. The allocation of their time in the region, in meetings with leaders from the region, and in engagement on issues germane to the region is the ultimate proof point of our commitment. Second point I'd make, Bates, and I realize I'm going long here, is that the proof point in terms of the sustainability of U.S. engagement is even simpler. It is the bipartisan conviction that American ongoing engagement across the spectrum of security, diplomacy, economic engagement, trade investment, and science, technology, people-to-people, and cultural engagement, that the U.S. Participation, presence, and investment in the Asia-Pacific region is in the vital national security interests of the United States. That is a widely held and a durable conviction, and I think the guarantor of continued U.S. rebalance. Over and out.
Thank you very much for that, Danny. I'm afraid we've come to the end of this particular discussion, and we really, once again, want to thank you very, very much for taking the time, so late as it is in Washington, to be with us today. We look forward to welcoming you to these shores, Danny, later this year. So thanks again very much.
Yes. Well, you're trying to have me. Thank you very much.